we're live. Welcome to our show today. I'm super excited. I'm Angela Brown, and I'm here with Omuugn. And today we are talking from the Live with Impact series. This is the insights and wisdom of Omuugn. Today we're talking about awareness. And as we go through our daily lives, it is so easy to drift aimlessly from day to day, from item to item and project to project, and not really pay attention to what it is we're supposed to be focusing on. Now, today's section comes from page 57 to 63. So if you don't have a copy of the book already, you can pick up a copy. It's available on sale. This is also part of a two-part series, and the two-part series you'll be able to pick up volume 1 and volume 2. So today we're still working on volume 1. Again, if you're just joining us, we meet here every single week, and we're working through the book, The Insights and Wisdom of Omuugn. Today we're talking about awareness. So please help me welcome Omuugn, and welcome on the topic of abundance. How are you today?
Good morning. It's good to be here. An exciting topic.
Yes, it is. Now I'm curious. You got to start from the beginning. What is awareness?
Well, there are a lot of synonyms that are used for awareness, but all of the synonyms are a little bit different. And awareness is sort of a personal awareness. It refers to your own emotions, thoughts, behaviors, your strengths and weaknesses, your values, and what really motivates you. It involves sort of how you perceive yourself and how you interact with the world around you. It takes you into a deeper introspection of your beliefs and your desires and the impact of your decisions. So awareness is it's developing it's being mindful of what's actually processing in you as you go through the different experiences of your day. It's how you look at things and how you analyze things and the basis from which you come to make those decisions. So,
Is it possible to be alert instead of aware, or is there a difference?
well, alertness is part of awareness. Um, Awareness goes into the past. It takes all of the lessons that you've learned. Like if you grew up around a wood-burning stove, you sort of learn to be cautious around things so that you wouldn't be injured in any way. And through our life, we've picked up a lot of experiences that go into our database, into our belief system. And alertness is taking a portion of that. It's sort of like your awareness is that you should be careful crossing the street because you've had experiences of that before, and you know that you might miss something. It's a good idea to look twice rather than just once, because you may not have seen the motorcycle or the bicyclist, or maybe you were looking for an automobile and you didn't see one, but you missed something else. So alertness is being aware sort of in a stepped up, motivated way in the moment that you're in. It enables you to make quick decisions, to run or to avoid danger in some way, or to be careful because you're immediately aware of what's happening, where awareness is more of a processing of all of the lessons that you've learned, and it's brought you to this moment in time. But now you need to be alert to what's happening based upon all of those lessons. So alertness
Well,
is,
I love the idea about crossing the road, because I think that's really a key, in that when you know you're crossing the road, and similar to the wood burning stove, there's something which is a trigger where you have to say to yourself, hey, wait a second, I need an extra layer of awareness right now. I'm about to do something dangerous. And so I think by adding that extra step in there, it's going to create that, hey, wait a second, I need to be on high alert. And I think that's a key when you're talking about alertness versus awareness, where there are times that we have to be alert. I know that if I get behind the wheel of a car, I have to be alert. I'm responsible for whatever happens next, just as if I were stepping out in front of a vehicle on the road.
that's right. And in relationships, we've learned a lot of things about relationships because of all of our past experiences with people. But when you're in the moment, if you're in a conversation and all of a sudden the conversation begins to heat up a little bit and it starts to move in a way that you don't want it to move, you need to be alert to those kind of changes that are happening instantly. And so alertness is just a sort of a heightened awareness that applies in the moment that you're in. So they relate to each other, but they're a little bit different in that way.
So would it be fair to say that if you were in a conversation, and going back to the example you just used, if you were in a conversation and the conversation maybe started to get a little bit heated, that would be the alertness that you are aware that the other person is starting to become defensive. And then is it true that maybe the awareness would be beyond the alertness instead of just the conversation being heated up? It's possible that I'm offending this person right now, and being aware with empathy that maybe they're coming from a different place or perspective in life than you are, and maybe being compassionate or more understanding about their viewpoint would be more helpful in that situation.
Oh, absolutely. Our awareness is bringing together all of the things that we've learned, all of the lessons that we've gone through, all of the circumstances that have taught us what we know today, and then being alert to that in a conversation that's starting to move. We're using that overall aware judgment that we've developed to react appropriately in the circumstance that we're in.
So when you say that we are using our awareness to bring together everything that we've learned, are you suggesting that we're tapping in possibly to an unconscious awareness and bringing that to the forefront?
Well, that's a very deep question. um, the truth is, we all have a belief system, and we actually operate out of that belief system. And awareness is a characteristic that's embedded within that belief system, and it networks with all other different kinds of characteristics, and we'll be talking about some of those. But yes, we need to be aware that there's processing going on in our, not only in our conscious mind, but in our subconscious reality, and in our, some people call it the superconscious or the higher consciousness. And it's where we relate to the creative spirit that pervades all of creation. And all of that ties together in innumerable ways. And I don't think we'll go in all of those directions today, but yes, our awareness is much deeper, and it includes a lot of things that are not just on the surface available to us. We have to actually stop and be aware of that processing. What emotions am I feeling right now? What are the things that pertain to our conversation and what's happening today in this podcast? There's just a whole range of possibilities and probabilities and what's actually happening in the moment, which leads us into another concept called mindfulness. Mindfulness is a way of being aware, but in a different way. Mindfulness is to be present in the moment and to actually evaluate what's going on around you. What are other people's emotions? What are they feeling? What's happening in your environment, and all different kinds of added things. What we're talking about this morning is more of a self-awareness, or awareness within our own processing. So yes, everything networks together, and it's a vast, everything that we talk about actually is its own book, its own subject that can be delved into in a lot of different ways.
So if you are aware, is that something that just happens, or is that something that you focus on and you concentrate or meditate upon to try to force and make happen?
Well, if you know very many people, you'll know that awareness is sort of like common sense. Common sense is not common at all. And awareness is not really common either. People become habitual creatures, and they do things by rote, they do things by habit, they do things unconsciously because that's just the way it works. What am I going to watch on television tonight? Well, I'll see what's on the channels, and so you just start flipping channels until something attracts your interest. You there's a difference between that and saying, I want to watch this movie tonight because I'm interested in this particular subject, and you go to what you want. It's a predetermined awareness of what you need or what you want to experience, rather than just what's happening around you and you're reacting to it.
Mhm. So then my next question is, how does one recognize what the awareness should be? So for example, if I was going to watch something on television, how would I know what to watch if I wasn't just randomly selecting something that popped up in front of me?
Well, if you're being aware of yourself, you're aware of, maybe you're aware that there are things that you don't know that you need to know. For example, I'm working on a project that is about electricity. I'm putting in some switches and wiring my carport, and I need to be aware of the principles of electricity. I've had experiences with electricity where I've been shocked and set back on my heels, and I know that it can be a dangerous thing.
Mhm.
And so if I'm aware that I'm going to do something that requires a specialized knowledge or information, then that's what I'm going to look at. That's the YouTube channel I'm going to. I'm looking for a particular thing so that my awareness leads me to the solution to a potential problem that I might have if I don't have that information.
So that begs the question, if you are using your awareness to learn something, does it then stack on top of the next set of skills? So you keep going from awareness to awareness to awareness until you are at a state of you've accomplished what you were trying to do instead of just drifting aimlessly, hoping that one day you would arrive there mysteriously.
Well, that's kind of an open-ended question. Um, it depends on what your ultimate goals and objectives are. You want your life to be in alignment with what you're really trying to accomplish. Everyone is sort of trying to determine what their purpose in life is. And the reality is that we have many purposes. If I'm a father of a family, I have certain purposes and objectives that need to be clearly defined in my understanding. And I need to be aware of all of those things. You're an aunt and you have different relationships with people, and you have business things, business associates, things that you're trying to accomplish in your business, and you need to be aware of all of those particular things. So our awareness depends on really who we are, where we are, what we're trying to accomplish, and put all of those things in a way that they align with each other and support our ultimate objectives, if
Very
that
well
makes
said.
sense.
Yeah, it does. Now, you talked a minute ago about mindfulness. What role does mindfulness play in awareness?
Well, mindfulness is a subset of awareness. As I say, mindfulness takes place in the present moment. What's actually happening around me? How are other people feeling? How does my action impact the people around me? Uh, what's happening in nature? If I'm out in my yard, I'm listening. I'm listening to the sounds of nature. I'm aware of how the wind is moving and how I respond to that. Uh, Maybe I'm aware that I should take my shoes off so that I can ground better, so that the flows of the circuits of reality can move through me with more ease. So mindfulness is being present in the moment. And mindfulness is based on not being judgmental,
Mm.
where awareness is you're making decisions about things. Mindfulness is just experiencing the moment. And what are the emotions that I'm feeling? What is the impact that nature is having on me? And I'm not trying to judge those things. I'm just trying to experience them and realize that they're happening. And mindfulness takes me into that place where I can sort of define what I'm experiencing, and then my awareness will take that defining moment in any direction that I want to take it. It's kind of like sitting down at the computer. You can actually go any place you want on the computer. You can experience anything you want to experience. You can learn things. You can waste your time on trivia. You can go to channels that are horror movies and really negative things. You can hear people arguing and fighting, and you can go to the soap operas and get involved in all of this unrealistic drama. Or you can go to a documentary or a different channel. You have the ability to make the decisions that you want to make and reach the goals that you're trying to reach. And your awareness, if you're in tune with that, will tell you how to make those kinds of decisions and where you should be and how you should be spending your time. And then when you're there, well, it's hard to be mindful when you're watching something on television or on the computer. You have to shut those things down. But mindfulness will take you into that present moment. What did I just learn? How does that impact my life? How is that going to affect the relationship that I have with other people? How am I going to respond to my children differently now because of something that I just became aware of that I wasn't aware of before? So mindfulness works with awareness on a present level in a different way, if that makes sense.
It does. And I'm curious because you were talking about getting involved, like watching horror movies and whatever, and that can be triggered by the mood that you're in. And so I'm curious, what is the emotional connection between where you are and the mindfulness that you have and the awareness that you have? How does the emotions that you have connect to that?
Well, that's kind of the essence of the whole project that we were working on, is that our emotions are either controlled by us because of our attitude and our awareness, or our emotions trigger a reactive response. And the active response a lot of times will reflect the biases that we have, or fears that were attached to us in our childhood through various experiences. Why are you afraid of spiders? Why are you afraid of mice? Why are you reacting to certain things in a certain way? It's because of certain experiences. Maybe when you were little, a mouse ran across the room and your mother screamed and jumped on a chair and was terrified. And that was impregnated into your belief system. And so you react to that in a present day circumstance. And so, yes, we need to be aware of what we believe and why and how we respond to that, because it directly impacts our emotions and our emotional response to things. If you're in an argument that's becoming heated, what will your emotional reaction be to that circumstance? Are you in control of your emotions? Do you have the ability to change emotions on the spot because of your awareness of what your emotions should be in that circumstance, because of a lesson that you've learned in the past? It all ties together, and it impacts the emotions that we feel and why we feel the way we do.
Well, as long as I can remember, I've had a saying, and I use this saying every day in my business: when you are aware, you have choices. And I like to be aware because I like to have choices. And it started when I was young and I went to buy one of my first vehicles. I went to a car dealership and the guy points me towards a particular type of car. And I didn't really have the money for that car. It was a little bit out of my price range. And although I wanted the car, I didn't know if it was the right car for me. And I didn't know if I was going to be able to make the payments on it. And he was really high pressured and he was making me mad. And he says, "Well, what are your options?" And it was a fantastic question. I said, "Wait a second, I do have options. What are my options?" And I said, "You know what? I don't know, but I'm going to go find out." So if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go figure out what my options are. And then if this is the right car, I'll be back. And instead of getting sold a car that I felt uncomfortable buying, or there were red flags, or I wasn't sure, I got up and I walked out. And I realized in that moment that there are always options. I do have choices. But because I was unaware, I was about to be talked into buying a car that I couldn't afford and didn't quite want. It wasn't quite the right car for me. But as I walked away, I was like, wait a second, I do have choices. What are they?
That's a good example of awareness and how it can be beneficial in all kinds of circumstances.
Well, I ask myself the question a lot because as a business owner, I do run into a lot of situations where I can be blinded by the information that I've been given. And I tell everybody on my team, I will always make the best decision that I can based on the information and the knowledge that I'm given. And so if you give me faulty information, I might make a faulty choice. It's going to be the very best choice I can make, but it might be faulty if you give me bad information. So even if I don't want to hear it, and even if it's not what I'm excited about, I would rather hear bad information so that I can make an educated business decision. And so I'm always trying to be aware because I guess that I don't always have the facts. Does that make sense?
Sure. If you make a decision based upon not having all the facts, that's basically called an assumption, where you assume something, and assumptions are always wrong. They're always wrong because you make an assumption because you don't have all of the facts. If you had all of the facts, you'd be making a decision rather than an assumption. And much of our lives are based upon assumptions. We perceive things a certain way. We see somebody doing something or saying something, and we don't realize that they are maybe going through a really traumatic experience in their life. Maybe they've just lost a loved one or a pet, or they've just walked out of an argument with someone. And because of what they say, we will make an assumption about how they respond to that. But if we're aware, then we go into a broader understanding of things. We look for different things. We're kind of aware of someone coming in upset already, realizing that we didn't upset them and we're no part of what they're experiencing. We're aware that they need maybe a shoulder to lean on or some encouragement or something. Awareness can lead us into a direction that is really helpful for people. But it doesn't happen just automatically. It's a skill that we develop. Being aware is a talent and a skill that we all need to work on. We can all do better.
Well, then my next question is what role does fear play in awareness? Because if you're aware that something is happening and you don't have the skills to manage or to deal with it, it's possible that you could be very afraid. And what role does fear play in that?
Well, fear is just an awareness of a situation that you don't want to be in. When I was in my youth, I was interested in rock climbing. And I was on a cliff at one point that was sandstone. And the sandstone it had a layer of fine dust on the top of it, and I was beginning to slip. And I was in a very high and precarious place. And it was one of the most sincere prayers I've ever said. I said, Lord, I need some assistance, and I need it relatively soon. And and I was able to stop. And my lesson was to never put myself into a situation like that again. And I became aware of the danger. There's a place for fear. There's a place for recognizing danger. There's a place for recognizing energy that's moving in a negative direction. There are a lot of negative things that we need to be aware of. Those things all have their place. If we're in a dangerous situation, sometimes we need to turn and run as fast as we're able. Sometimes we just need to make a different choice. For example, alcohol is a popular choice for many people. A lot of the alcoholic beverages are popular, and you always see them advertised. people having parties and having fun, and they're on the beach and they're in a backyard barbecue, and that's part of the social fun of the moment. But they never show you the drunkenness or the broken families or the disease or the health problems that can occur from the use of that particular product. And so the awareness of danger and the awareness that there are two sides to almost everything that we need to be aware of. There's a positive possibility and there's a negative possibility. And so, yes.
Okay, yes.
Yes.
So my question then is, how do we develop our awareness so that we can see both sides of that? Because if what I'm seeing is people being happy and having happy relationships and dancing and singing and having parties and joining campfire groups and things like that, a part of me wants that. And if that's what's being shown to me and alcohol is included, I might think, like I said, making erroneous assumptions based on the information you're given, that in order for me to have that, I must have alcohol. So how do we develop the other side where we are actually aware of both sides of that scenario?
That is a good question. And that really is the reason that I wrote the volumes of work that we're talking out of. Um, there is an overwhelming, pervasive, creative blueprint that consists of eternal laws or universal laws and foundational principles. And as we learn our lessons through our awareness, what we're doing is we're introducing ourselves to those laws and principles so that when we make a decision like is alcohol good for me or bad for me? There are actually pros and cons. There are a lot of people who say, I feel better. My thinking, I have more clarity in my thinking if I have a drink or two of alcohol. And there are other people who are addicted to alcohol and have a totally different experience. And so you have to be able to go back to a standard by which you can judge things. And the standard by which you judge everything are the universal laws and foundational principles. So if you're going to make a decision, if you're going to be aware about something, your awareness should resolve in one of those principles. Is this principle the reason I'm making this choice? Or am I making this choice by the seat of my pants on the spur of the moment without any undergirding or foundation behind it? Ideally, and life doesn't always flow this way naturally, we have our ups and we have our downs. We have our mountains and we have our valleys. And life is circuitous. And life takes us in a lot of places so that we can learn a lot of different things that we need to learn. But it all resolves into those foundational principles.
So
And
are the foundational principles a default? Is that your baseline?
that's the baseline. If you're doing something that is contrary to a foundational principle, your decision is going to be anywhere from inaccurate to devastatingly wrong.
Mm.
Like buying your car when you don't have the finances, you don't have this and that and the other to support that decision. You just dug yourself into a hole that might negatively impact all different aspects of your life. We haven't talked about debt, but debt is the opposite of freedom, and freedom is one of those eternal principles. What is it that makes us free? And so our awareness helps us make those kinds of decisions. And it's important that we understand those principles, or we just drift around aimlessly.
Well, you just brought up something interesting when you talked about finding yourself in a negative situation. And I'm curious to know how negativity plays into that. There are a lot of people that are just by default negative people. I'm related to some of them by marriage, and they're just negative people. If there's a positive or a negative, they're going to automatically drift towards the negative because that is their comfort zone. How do you become aware if you're typically or traditionally a negative type of person?
Well, once you've defined what the principles are and how the universal laws work, you want to work in harmony with those. And one of the principles is the way energy flows. There's an eternal law called the law of polarity. And polarity means that energy can flow in either direction. And as soon as you become aware that the energy is flowing in a negative direction, you have the opportunity to change the direction of that energy. And the way you do that is you focus your intention on the opposite of what you're experiencing. In other words, if this is making the energy flow in a negative direction, what I need to think about is that rather than this. And so you change your focus, you change your attention to what you want to experience, what you want to be your ultimate goal. And you can change the direction of that flow of energy. So
That
if you're,
reminds me of downhill skiers. One of the very first things they teach you on downhill skiing day is don't look at the trees. If you look at the trees, you're going straight for them. But if you look at the space between the trees, you can navigate your way between them and not get all bugged up by running into them.
that's right. What you focus on, you're going to attract to yourself. So definitely focus on the spaces while you're skiing.
So, what is the difference then between intuition and awareness?
Well, intuition is tapping into some of those other things that we talked about, your subconscious mind, what's processing at deeper levels within inside of you, what's really happening with your belief system, because you're going to intuitively interact with what we call our conscience. Our conscience is something that operates inside of us that connects us to a higher order of things, to those universal laws and principles. If you're out of harmony with those principles, your conscience will tell you that, and your intuition will flow out of your interaction with your own conscience. So being attuned to the spiritual dimension that we're in, and we do that in several different ways through meditation and pondering and the things that we study and what we focus our attention on, those things develop the ability to utilize our intuition in a very proactive way. And a lot of people experience their intuition in a sudden circumstance where they'll say, I'm not where I'm supposed to be.
Mhm.
That intuition tells them that they're going in the wrong direction, and they need to respond to that quickly and be aware that their intuition is trying to tell them something, trying to warn them, trying to protect them. So our intuition is there to tap into all of those spiritual realities and sometimes the subconscious lessons that we've learned, past experiences. Our intuition will bring that to our awareness in the moment. We'll remember something that happened 20 years ago and say, well, I don't want to do that again. I want to avoid that and experience this instead. So our intuition and our awareness, they work hand in hand. They support one another. And our intuition can come from our awareness, and our awareness takes intuition and applies it in the present moment. So they work together hand in hand in that way, I think.
So, if I was going to develop my awareness and I was going to become a pro at it, what would I do? What are some steps I would take?
Well, you would you would start to ask yourself why and how you make certain decisions. You would you would ask yourself why you have certain habits and why you do certain things. Uh, you would ask yourself why you react to things rather than proactively respond to things the way you want to. Uh, you're going to run into all kinds of situations and people, like you were saying, a lot of people are just negative people. And you don't want to surround yourself with negative people. Sometimes you have to interact with them. but your responsibility in interacting with them is to show them some positivity and maybe help them to see a different reality. People want to suck your energy if you have any extra. And negative people don't have any of their own. It's a negative energy, and they want to take your energy to replace the energy they don't have. So you have to be very, very careful, and you have to be always developing that skill. And there are a lot of ways that you can do that. You can read uplifting things. You can listen to uplifting music. There are beautiful things that you can experience. All of those things heighten your awareness in a positive way and makes you skillful in that area.
Well, it's important because I know that going through my own personal journey, I found myself hot-headed, if you will, and a little bit on the stubborn side. And I think that I get that from, maybe it's somewhat inherited. But I find myself in situations where I'm bracing myself. It's kind of like the brace for impact concept. And for me, I was on a business trip. I had a few extra hours. So I went to the local aquarium. And as I went in the aquarium, there were all different kinds of fish displays that were just magnificent. And they had sharks in tanks and what have you. And there was one particular display that caught my attention. It was just a great big glass box. And there was nothing inside, but there was like this attendant that was standing there right beside it. And I said, what is this display? What is going inside? And she said, no, this is the display. This is a shark-proof box. And we put these in the depths of the ocean and we put a photographer inside of them. And the photographer can take pictures of ocean life and sharks can get right up close, but they can't hurt the photographer. The photographer can't hurt the shark and the shark can't hurt the photographer. And as I left, I was really enamored by that thought. I said, I need a shark-proof box in my own life because there are people in my life that get so close to me and they get all up in my business, and then I react and we hurt each other. And so I started saying almost as a mantra, shark proof, shark proof. And every time caller ID would come up and it was going to be one of those family members that would cause angst in my life, I would say to myself, shark proof. And that was my moment of awareness, like, hey, whatever is about to happen next can and will be held against you. Maybe not in a court of law, but it's going to be held against you. And so I just remember being really consciously aware that I'm now in the danger zone for me. And I'm going to misrepresent my foundational principles, as you would say. And so I wanted to be consciously aware that whatever happens next, I need to be on high alert. I need to tap into my intuition and know what to say and how to guide this conversation in a way that's kind and compassionate and empathetic. Because if I just go with the flow, I'm going to spout off at somebody and I'm going to hurt somebody's feelings. And in the end, we're not going to be friends, if that makes sense. So I would just say
Sure.
to myself, shark proof, shark proof. And to this day, I mean, it's just that one word. But what that means to me is, hey, glass box around you, be very careful that you don't harm the situation and that the situation does not harm me back.
Yeah, it brings up sort of the idea that everyone, and by everyone I mean everyone, has their own belief system. And not everyone is in the same place at the same time, and not everyone knows all of the same things. Everyone is coming from a very, very unique place through their genetics, through their childhood, through their culture, through the traditions that they were raised in. And so we're interacting with people who are in totally different worlds of belief. And like you say, there has to be something that you can utilize to protect yourself, to insulate yourself from everyone else's belief system. And a shark cage might be a good analogy for that. You need to have, in ancient traditions, they would draw a circle around them in the sand. And that circle was meant to keep everything out that they didn't want in the circle. And that was kind of a conscious decision that they made. Some people would draw a circle to bring people in and keep them within the circle and keep everything else out. So a circle can work both ways depending on what your belief system is. But we all need to have some type of a mechanism to deal with things that are contrary to what we want to experience. And the whole idea of life is to accomplish your goals, to find out really what your purpose in life is and how you can fulfill that and how you accomplish those things. And we have to analyze whether or not the habits that we're allowing into our lives support our ultimate goals and objectives. If they don't, we need to be aware of that, and we need to have a process to actually change our habits. We need to be able to analyze what's happening. We do that through the principle of awareness. You can't do anything until you're aware of it. You don't know that you need to make a change until you're aware that a change needs to happen. And so we need to be able to discern if what we're doing is in alignment with our goals and objectives, because a lot of times they're not. And one of the interesting facets of this is that we also have false beliefs. Sometimes the way we were raised or introduced to things, it wasn't the right thing. For example, in the world today, we have people who believe that the world is a sphere and some who believe that the world is flat. And they both believe those things very strongly. And yet, probably not both of them are accurate. But there's probably elements of truth in both. And so you need to have a way to discern for your own belief system what is true and what is not true. What in your belief system may not be a true belief at all. Is it based on a universal law or a foundational principle? Or do you believe something that is contrary to those principles? And if that's part of your belief system, then you need to change that part of your belief system once you become aware that a change needs to take place.
That's an interesting concept because I remember moving away from home and I had a set of beliefs that I was brought up with. And they always worked for me. They were good beliefs, they were a good set of foundations. And many of them were religious based. And as I moved out into the world, I started looking around me. And I grew up in a faith where if you believe this one thing in this little box, then you get to go to heaven. And if you don't, then you go to hell. I mean, it was that cut and dried. And as I moved away from
Are you
home,
accusing me?
no, but as I moved away from home, I was enamored with the thought that there were some really cool people out there and they were all going to hell. Okay, so I felt bad about that. And then I wondered, well, wait a second, why do I have to judge that? Because the religious texts that I grew up reading said don't judge other people. Well, if that's true, then it's not my responsibility to judge and decide whether or not somebody gets to go to heaven or hell. So I'm going to be friends with everybody and I'm going to let the chips fall where they may, and I don't have to make that decision. So I released myself from playing general manager of the universe and deciding who gets to go to heaven and who goes elsewhere when they die. And as a result of that, I started questioning my foundational beliefs that everything inside this box was where it's at. And I said, what if instead of just being one room of a house, it was actually a house with multiple rooms? And we all believe something slightly different, but we all believe some of the same stuff. And I said, wait a second, that's a better service to me. That works better for me. And it wasn't that the box I grew up in was wrong. It was kind of like wearing a pair of shoes. And at this particular moment of my life, it's like I had worn out those shoes and they now had holes in them. The arch support was gone and the shock absorbers in the shoes were gone. They worked for a period of time, but no longer were they going to carry me the next distance. So taking them off and getting a new pair of shoes, a new belief system that had better support and better arch support and better shocks, didn't have holes in them, was going to serve me better for the future. And so I released the need to say, oh, well, I believe what is in this stringent little box and everything else outside of that is untrue. And just being more aware that there was more going on in the world around me. And so I have questioned a lot of my beliefs over the years with the intention of finding a place that was of better service. Going back to the thing, I'm going to make the decisions based on the information I have. If I have new information and I'm aware of different things, then I can make different choices. And by being aware that there were some really super cool people that maybe didn't believe in this little box, that then I became aware that, hey, we can still be friends, we can still work together, we can still have, a world of support and friendship that wasn't locking them out because of a prior belief that I had that came from a place of fear.
That's an excellent piece of awareness. Um, Religion itself is a very, very broad spectrum of belief. And it's true that in some religious uh, processes, you might say, they don't serve us well. And we may see life a different way. And we need to have the freedom to make those kinds of choices so that we're doing the things that, uh, let me say it this way, we should always be on the cutting edge of our comfort zone. If we're in a place where we just feel satisfied with things, with life in general, we have a tendency not to stretch, not to learn new things, not to question things. And that's really where all of the action takes place, is when we're seeking truth. We're seeking a better belief system than we have, a better way of doing things, how to combine things to make them more efficient, or how to do things more effectively. Our mind should always be engaged in that kind of a thing, realizing that we are in a, if you will, a created universe with a creation blueprint that we want to live in harmony with. But the way people have interpreted that creation blueprint to their own belief system or their own objectives, uh, that doesn't necessarily reflect the true creation blueprint. It's sort of a pseudo blueprint that men have created. And so just to believe something because it has been traditionally there all of our lives, that's not a good place to be. So we need to be aware of what is true and what is foundational and respond to that according to our belief system. And we should always be questioning our belief system to make certain that it is in alignment with those principles, those foundational, universal things. So, yes, instead of thinking in the box or outside of the box, we should actually think as though there isn't a box. There's only a field of possibilities. And when we focus in on some of those possibilities, they become probabilities. And the more we focus on a probability, the more probable it is that it will become actual in our life. I know that in your business, you have sort of gone through the field of possibilities, and you've made decisions that bring those possibilities into the business form that you have today, with all of the principles and the pieces of software and all of the processes that you go through and how you interact with people and how you relate to all of the different social media groups and all on and on and on it goes. You have sort of defined your field of probabilities, and you're very successful in what you do. But it's because you are aware of those kinds of things, and your thinking is just about possibilities and probabilities rather than being confined in a box, as you say.
Well, thank
So,
you for saying that. We have thought about a lot of things that have happened in our business. And when something goes awry, I look at it as a blessing. I know this is kind of the twisted back end approach of things, but when something really bad happens in our business, instead of getting upset and throwing a tantrum, I like to stop and say, wait a second, this just happened. Why did this happen? And how do we prevent it from happening again? Is there a lesson that we learned from this happening? And it's an interesting question because I know in the house cleaning industry, it's easy to clean someone's house and they become a high maintenance customer and they just nitpick your work and they just complain about everything and they're just miserable and they're hard to be around. And in the beginning, it was easy to say we're not a good fit for each other and then cut those clients off and go find a new happier customer. But one of the things I discovered was, and I call it the $5,000 mystery shopper. If I was to hire a mystery shopper to come into my business and they were to rip apart everything under the hood and give me feedback, I would pay them $5,000 for that service. And that's a lot of money to me. But instead, oh my goodness, check it out. I have somebody that is paying me for my service and they're willing to open up under the hood and to rip it apart and to pick it apart and to tell me everything we did wrong. So instead of me paying them $5,000, they paid me for the privilege to tell me that they're a mystery shopper. And I started looking at it differently so that when they gave me this feedback, I was like, hey, wait a second, that's pretty good information. Is it true? Is it something we can fix? How fast can we fix it? What do we need to do to fix it? And then, as long as we have this person that's on our doorstep and they're just with all their information, what can we learn from them? Because as long as they're on a roll, they will keep giving us information. And if we fix it, they'll give us feedback. And let's keep them in our sphere of influence as long as possible so that we can fix and tweak these things, because here's a person that's giving us honest feedback. A lot of people do not like confrontation, and so they would rather you just quietly go away and they hire someone else instead of them just icking at you all this gunk. Bring on the gunk, we need it, and it's saving me $5,000 in the process. So we started welcoming those conversations to help us become more aware. How can we improve? And so I really love the fact that we do have a lot of negativity in our business, and we have boundaries for every single one of those things that happen, not just to protect ourselves, but so that we can learn from the situation so that moving forward, we either don't do that again or we handle the situation differently by having some processes in place.
Yeah, and you being aware of those things is the key to the whole thing. Once you're aware that something is not working or working the way it should be, you can make change. And change is a universal law, by the way. Everything is always changing, except the first three laws, which we won't get into today. But
But you do have me curious.
but everything is changing. We're changing. We don't believe the same thing today that we believed 20 years ago.
Mm.
Our beliefs change. Our beliefs are organic. Our DNA is always changing. Aspects of our DNA are always changing. And so we can create a new reality for ourselves at any moment. But in order to do that, to make change effective, we need to be aware of what is happening, and we need to be aware of what we're trying to accomplish and where we're going. Our life needs to revolve around our awareness of our concept of reality, rather than let what's happening in the world around us take us in directions that we don't want to go.
So
We should
speaking
live
of
a...
that, I'm
Go
sorry, go
ahead.
ahead.
No, go ahead.
Speaking of that, if you have somebody that is highly evolved and they're aware of a particular situation that involves another person who is not highly evolved and they are not aware, how do you work through a situation like that where both people are trying to bring the best versions of themselves, but they're on completely different levels and they are worlds apart?
Well, everyone is on a different level, just like everyone has their own belief system. Reality resolves into resonant frequencies. There's only energy and information, and we're composed of energy and information. That's who we are. If you take us all apart into our little tiny, minute pieces, science is looking for what they call the God particle. And they keep believing that they've found it, and then they find something else. But I think the God particle is actually intelligence. And intelligence always keeps changing, keeps growing, keeps combining, keeps manifesting itself in different ways. And our secret is to be aware of those changes, being aware that our belief system is changing, but we want it to change in the direction that we want it to change. We don't want changes. In fact, changes in our bodies that we don't want, we call cancer. It can negatively affect us. So if we're going to change, we want to change to become healthier, happier, more prosperous, more experiencing things that we prefer to experience. We want to embrace joy and happiness rather than negativity and suffering and pain. So yeah, we need to make that differentiation, and we need to work with our belief system. We need to adapt to change in a positive way through our awareness of what's happening and what we prefer. And the way you're running your business, I think, is a good example of that. So that you're moving in the direction that you want to move, accomplishing what you want to accomplish, and things that don't fit into that paradigm are just not on the channel that you're operating on.
Well, thank you for saying that. I appreciate that because I am consciously trying to do the best that I can every day. But let's suppose that I wasn't. Let's suppose that I was just drifting from day to day and I didn't really have a conscious awareness of the things that were going on around me. But let's say after this conversation and watching this, I wanted to develop my awareness. How would I go about starting today? What actionable steps could I do today to start focusing on awareness and being more aware of just the world around me and how that interacts with all of the different choices that I'm making?
Well, the big secret here is to ask questions. And the more profound your questions, the more profound your answers will be. And you start by keeping a journal. You need to start writing things down. A lot of times we're always thinking about something. Our minds are running all of the time. And we need to stop and take the time to write things down. That's what I experienced in the volumes of work that we're going through. People would ask me, give me some advice about this thing. Tell me, what are some of your insights on this particular thing? And I realized at some point that my wisdom and insights and understanding, they were all kind of like in a cement mixer going around inside of me. But once I sat down and I began to write them out in the form of a journal or a notebook, this is what I really believe, this is what I have learned, then everything started to fall out into what we have in these volumes of insights and wisdom. So I think the first step is we call it concretizing, or writing down in very specific ways what we become aware of. And once we do that, we can see what our belief system is. And once we can see, then we can compare that to the foundational principles and the universal laws and say, do they line up together? If they don't, then this belief system needs to change. And so writing things down is one way. Another way is to be aware of our negative thoughts. We have a lot of negative thoughts and a lot of negative words that we speak a lot of times. Sometimes we hurt other people's feelings because we're thoughtless in how they're experiencing life and our interaction together. And sometimes we'll use hyperbole such as, you always do this or you always do that. And people don't always do that, but there may be a time or two when they do that and it has bothered you in a certain way. And so you bring that to their attention, which is a negative thing.
Mhm.
And so challenging your negative thoughts and words is another aspect. And another thing that you can do is to reflect consistently. Take some time at the end of each day or at least each week to actually sit down and reflect on your life and the experiences that you've had that have been positive and negative, and what has produced each, and how you could resolve negative things, and how you could amplify the positive things and make them even better. So if you take the time to actually reflect, it's really an eye-opener. And then another thing that's really helpful is to utilize this principle that we talked about, being mindfulness, where you can look at yourself without making any judgments. These are the emotions that I'm feeling. These are the thoughts that I'm thinking. These are the things that are processing in me. Now, what am I going to do with those things? And then you move from mindfulness to awareness. These are the lessons that I've learned, and this is where I want to go to apply this information. So, I mean, there are a lot of things that you can do. Practicing gratitude is another one. What are you really thankful for? Make a list every day of what you're thankful for. And it changes your attitude. It changes your mindset. It makes you more aware of the blessings in your life. And right now, I know that our time is up. And
It
so
is up. How did we end up on the short end of an hour?
it seemed to fly really fast today, but being aware is really a key to our happiness and a fulfilling life. And so I hope that we can all do that and implement some of the things that we've talked about today.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. This was, as usual, enlightening, and it's not just hyperbole when I say always enlightening. It's always enlightening. This was so much fun. And next week, we're going to be reading from the Insights and Wisdom of Omuugn, going through the next section, which is on beauty and the beauty that is mysteriously just pops up in the world around us. So I'm super excited about that. If you haven't already, get a copy of the book, The Insights and Wisdom of Omuugn. And